If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
As well. But let's talk kind of where we are now at the All-Star break. So after New York won their game, the Nets beat the Heat. So the Knicks are in sole possession of the 6th seed. They are 33-27, a half game up on the Miami Heat for that 6th spot. And they're now just 2 games back of the Brooklyn Nets for that 5th spot. The Knicks also got great news on the injury front. MSG's Alan Hahn said Wednesday night that Mitchell Robinson has been cleared for contact and is expected to rejoin the team after the All-Star break, which is huge news for the New York Knicks. Mitchell Robinson missed a month of time with a broken thumb. So now you have Mitchell Robinson coming back in the fold. You have a team that's now secured right now in the 6th spot. The 5 seed is within an arm's length away from them, just 2 games back. How would you assess where the Knicks are at this point going to the All-Star break overall? I mean, to kind of take a big picture look at it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we gotta recalibrate what we think this team could be, because right now, on the season, only 7 teams in the NBA have more wins than the Knicks. The Knicks rank 8th in net rating. That's a season's worth of big picture stuff here now, dating back to December 4th, that Sunday night game against the Mavs. Knicks have the 4th best record in the NBA. So there's again, they're top 5 in offensive efficiency during that stretch, just outside the top 10 in defensive efficiency. So we kind of got to look at, we got to change the way we think about this team, I think, a little bit. There's 22 games left in the season. But for me, this, just kind of looking at the big picture this morning, and I wrote about it in the newsletter, I think, and we'll talk about the bench unit and the, shooting percentages have increased, and Julius Randle's, he's been a far more efficient player. Hart gives them, their defensive rating has increased. But outside of numbers and all that other quantifiable stuff, to me, kind of what struck, the reason I wrote about it was, I'm not sure if you're watching the MSG post game, like in the, the few minutes after the game ended, when they interviewed Brunson on the court.
Yeah.
Rebecca Harlow was talking to him and just kind of, where do you think about this team? And of course, Brunson saying the right things. It's a good win, but we need to stay focused. We need to, just the Derek Jeter, don't say anything brilliance of a guy who's who grew up in New York, and his father was a professional athlete and understands the best answer is saying a lot and giving the person asking the question nothing. You just
right.
Just again say all the right things, and he's doing that. Right after the interviews, RJ Barrett comes over and kind of gives him a hug, and Brunson smiles and he pushes him away. Says something like, "Don't say anything crazy," or don't say anything foolish, or so Barrett giggles and walks away. Rebecca Harlow asks him, what do you see from the Knicks right now? Like, where are you guys? Brunson replies, "We're in a good place." And he literally, as he finishes, that sentence, and he's going to continue on with the answer, a shirtless, smiling Julius Randle comes over and gives him a big bear hug and says, "Yeah, JB, yeah, baby." Like they're clowning around, and Brunson escapes the bear hug from Randle and pushes him away, and he's smiling. And Rebecca Harlow says, "It seems like the chemistry's pretty good, and Randle's still kind of hovering over, and Brunson goes, 'Dude, what do you want, man?' And Brunson goes, 'I thought you wanted the interview.' And Randle kind of, laughing, runs away, and Brunson kind of reiterates like 2 or 3 more times. He's just smiling, and she's smiling, and everyone's giggling, and he just says, 'We're in a good place.' And I couldn't help but think back to like a year ago at this time.
Right.
Knicks were so far from a good place. In the middle of a 7-game losing streak that would end in early March, they were 13 games below 500.
Yeah, they won like one. Didn't they win like 1 game in February? Something crazy like that. Yeah,
it was just ugly and awful. And to see where they are now, the complete 180, you just can't help but look at one man. Essentially they have the same roster. Like the Knicks. You were Alex Burks and Kemba Walker are no longer here, but Grimes and Randle and Mitch Robb and RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley, and Obi Toppin.
Yep.
All the guys in terms of minutes played. Ihart's the only real rotation player that wasn't on the team last year. And you look at how much that's turned around. On the flip side, look over in Dallas. they have the same roster essentially. They've only replaced before obviously the Kyrie Irving trade, which shook everything up. But for the first 55 plus games of the season, they had essentially the same roster they did last year when they won 52 games and went to the Western Conference Finals. The only significant change was obviously Jalen Brunson left for New York, but they brought in Christian Wood, so he's kind of absorbed those minutes. The Mavs right now are 2 games over 500, and they're 16th in the NBA net rating. So I just looking at the big, like there's like chemistry is like really hard to define. We've seen it when it doesn't work. It's kind of there's blaring sirens. Just look across the river in Brooklyn. The greatest collection of offensive talent we were told in NBA history. That didn't end up really well, and a lot of it has to do with ego and narcissism and selfishness. And that exploded. Look at the Hawks. Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, John Collins, Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, now Sadiq Bey. Like, they're a really talented team. That's why every pundit picked them to finish ahead of the Knicks this season. But the presence of Brunson, how often did we see Randall smile like that last year? It's not just his production.
Never.
It's just the feel and the vibe of this team has completely changed. So the on-court, as valuable as Brunson has been in terms of points per game and assists per game and turnovers dropping, I just can't help but think that he's really directly attributable to the change of the emotion in and around the team. So he deserves a ton of credit for that. And, next week we'll talk about, games on the schedule and how many games they might finish with and how many games they might need to win and et cetera. But just as we, I thought it was worth to take a couple minutes to just kind of reflect over these first few months, because again, I think we talked about it last pod. Like, a lot of people have told me this is the most fun I've had watching the Knicks in I don't know how many years, and obviously a lot of it has to do with winning, of course, like that's the main thing. But the way the team shares the ball, the way the team competes, I think it just kind of takes on the identity of Jalen Brunson. So again, you can't give enough credit to the guy. The fact that he's not going to be in the All-Star game is an absolute joke. It's literally a joke at this point. And I think, to your point, like earlier this week in one of the pods, when you said one of the storylines should be represented in the All-Star game, and I don't know if there's how many bigger storylines there are. Obviously, the stars, Durant, Kyrie getting traded and everything, but in terms of from the start of the season to now, the story of Jalen Brunson and his impact on the Knicks is, really at the very top of the list.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, storylines in this NBA, Donovan Mitchell going to Cleveland, he's starting in the All-Star game.
Yeah.
The Celtics getting their 2 All-Stars. They're one of the best teams in the league. Like the story, the Sacramento Kings, they have DeMontis, and eventually, finally, they got De'Aaron Fox. Like, it feels like I said, the storylines of the NBA were being represented by the All-Star selections, and the Knicks. And one of the biggest ones in the Eastern Conference to me is Jalen Brunson. By far the best free agent signing this season is not there, even though he's took the Knicks that they won, I think, 37 games in total last season. They have 33 wins right now. And they've massively improved this year, and he's not there. That's very unfortunate. But when I go to those standings, though, and talking about these teams, because there's a certain point, and we're not going to get crazy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, the Knicks are going to win a championship this year or anything like that. But when we talk about what this Knicks team can do and where they rank in the NBA, I think there needs to be more respect put on their name. Because when I hear about these other teams that can win championships, I hear about the Phoenix Suns, Los Angeles Clippers, Dallas Mavericks, Golden State Warriors. Guess what? The Knicks have better records than all those teams I just named. All of them. And those teams, we routinely say, oh, well, if they piece it together and they get healthy, or maybe they can win a championship. Well, the Knicks are doing this without Mitchell Robinson. So what if he gets healthy? I'm not saying, they can win a championship. I'm just saying, when we talk about how good this team is, because I said this on this episode, on this podcast, but I think I said it more on WFAN when I was hosting a couple weeks ago. It was starting to become maddening, this anger from some segment of Knicks fans with, like, frustration that the team wasn't better. And I'm like, the Knicks are a good team now. Like, what? Like, they've been a terrible team for years, and they made the playoffs that one year. Then they had a miserable season last year. But when you watched how they played this season, what is there really to complain about? Brunson is playing like an all-star. Julius Randle has returned to all-star form. The Knicks look like a competent team. They play hard every night. like, yes, we'll go through the, RD needs to play better and this guy needs to be more consistent. We can talk about those things. But some of the anger that comes around like this team and the idea they're going nowhere, Rome was not built in a day. And things sometimes have to take time to progress. This has been a really good Knicks season so far. The fact that they're 6 games above 500 going into the All-Star break, that's the best case scenario I think anybody looking at this season could have asked for. If you told me they were 6 games above 500 with Donovan Mitchell, I would have said, all right, that sounds about right. The fact that they're there without him, and they did not make that trade, like, there's a lot of positive signs to take away from this team. And I can't say enough about the job that everybody's done. Leon getting Jalen Brunson, doing everything it took to get him, and Tibbs for finding a way to fit these guys together in a position for them to succeed. It took a long time. It didn't look like it was going to work out at points in the season, but it's found a rotation, adding Josh Hart to this mix. Now this is a Knicks team that the city can be proud of. I think that these fans should be proud. I think a lot of them are, but there's still some segment that are just saying, well, what does this mean? Who cares what it means? It means that your team is in the 6th seed. It means that your team right now is in a playoff hunt. Like, root for the team that's in the playoff hunt. Let's see what happens here. Like, sometimes we talk about watching TV shows and people want to say, well, what's going to happen at the end? Sometimes just watch the show. Like, the show or the movie, like, it may end up fine. It may end up good. You don't know. Like, to always just, like, just be so, like, defeatist and so, like, angry about, well, I don't know what's going to happen with this and that. It's like, just watch what's going on. Okay. A month ago, we didn't think they'd be here after Mitchell Robinson went down. Now they're 6 games above 500. Mitchell Robinson's coming back. It's all, like you said, the vibes are immaculate. Like, I don't know how else to say it.
That's it. And the Knicks 14 games without Mitchell Robinson to be 8-6, 2 games above 500 in those 14 games. Remarkable. The thing I would say about the segment of the fan base to prove how idiotic, I don't want to say it, how funny some fans can be. There is a segment of the fan base that is watching Cam Reddish put up 17.
I know.
In a Blazers game, as if it's in a 20-point loss, as if that matters when Josh Hart has had the best 3-game start to a Knicks career, then you could possibly imagine. So again, you can't worry about the 10% here and at either extreme, because there were people that are convinced that they're going to win 60 games and there are people that just want to see the whole thing burn. But you're right. I think the vast majority of fans in the middle, and maybe that's a good metaphor for society, we're more on the same page than we're not. So yes, there's a lot to obviously to look ahead towards. And you mentioned the return of Mitchell Robinson. That's when things get really interesting. This team has played, again, just outside their offense has been fantastic, top 5 in offensive efficiency over the last 2 months. And the defense has hung in there and better than league average during this stretch without Mitchell Robinson, or slightly below league average without Mitchell Robinson, but just outside the top 10 for the season. When he returns, now you're going to see, how about 48 minutes of Mitchell Robinson and this new and improved Isaiah Hartenstein? That's what really unlock an even higher ceiling for the Knicks. Sims has played well, but I think clearly Mitch Robin and this version of Hartenstein have established themselves as in a big game. Those are the 2 guys I want to see. Sims is great to have as an insurance policy. And, he's had some ups and downs and played relatively well of late. But yes, credit to Hartenstein, because to your point, he was more of a finesse kind of, a high assist rate guy that was kind of, facilitating. Now he's doing dirty work under the boards, blocking
he's a bulldog.
Shots, grabbing rebounds, everything you could ask for him. And in terms of, yes, to talk about championship expectations right now would be foolish. But I can say this morning, and probably for the first time since we started this podcast this season, that I wouldn't be surprised to see the Knicks win a first-round series right now. I think they'll probably be underdogs if they get to the 5 seed and have to play the Cavs. Cavs have home court advantage. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley. Kevin Love asked for a buyout, which I found odd.
He hasn't been playing much recently.
We'll see how that plays itself out. But the reason I think that the Knicks can win a playoff series is because I think they have a chance to get to the 5 seed. They wouldn't, in my opinion, or I should say it's unlikely that they'd be able to compete and extend the cream of the crop in the East. The Celtics and the Bucks specifically. Sixers are a little bit different story. We've shown that they can hang. But if the Knicks avoid that obviously the play into the 7 or 8 scenario, and can jump past the hold off the Heat and jump past the Nets for the 5 seed, it seems almost assuredly that the Cavs will hold on to the 4 seed, unless the Cavs and Sixers might flip flop. Not crazy; they're only separated by a couple games, but goodness, that would be a highly anticipated first round series. The
Oh
Knicks
yeah.
and Jalen Brunson against Jalen Brunson, who torched Donovan Mitchell
Yeah.
last April in the first round of the Utah Dallas
series. Yeah.
So just the storylines on that one, forget about it. We're a long way from there. We're 22 games still left in the regular season. But again, if we're talking realistically, the Knicks, as you mentioned, they have a better record than all these teams. They've played better over the last 2 months. They've done this without RJ Barrett playing well, playing poorly, as a matter of fact. They've done this without Mitchell Robinson at all. The best case scenario, they come back. Brunson continues to play incredibly efficient. Randall does Randall things, which is pretty much a safe bet. And even if Brunson kind of regresses to the mean a little bit, I mean, goodness gracious, the guy can't average 30 points a night, you would think.
Yeah.
But here we are. But then you still, Grimes has been in a shooting slump. You expect him to improve the second half of the season. You expect Barrett to improve the second half of the season. You get Mitch Rob back. If Hardenstein can maintain that level, IQ is a metronome, just so incredibly consistent every single time he steps on the floor. The best thing you can say about this Knicks team is whoever that 5 seed is, whoever that 6 seed is, they're hoping they play a team that's not the Knicks, whether it's the KD and Kyrie-less Nets, or even the Heat. At this stage of the game, if you ask one of those teams who you'd rather play, I think a lot of them would say Miami, which says a lot about how far the Knicks have come.
Yeah, and when you talk about those top teams, like I agree, like the Celtics and Bucks, they feel like certain level of monster that it would be tough for the Knicks to beat those teams.
Yeah.
Though they competed well against both those teams this season. I can't put the Sixers in that conversation right now. To me,
That's fair.
If the Knicks get even the 6th seed, I want the smoke. I'm telling you right now, I want the smoke with Philly. Like Philly has had now, again, to be clear, I did pick Philly to go to the championship before this season. So I was high on Philly coming into the season. But they got to show up. Like how many postseasons we've seen with Philly where there's always some excuse for why they didn't get it done. Whether it's Ben Simmons, then Ben Simmons was out, and then it was Embiid was hurt. Like it's always something with Philly. Doc Rivers can't manage his way out of a paper bag, to quote Adam Shine. Like it's always something.
Yep.
So I would take my chances against a team that always seems to find a way to screw it up in that situation. And I think the Knicks match up okay. Mitchell Robinson, the guard, Embiid. They got now plenty of wing defenders now. When you add Josh Hart, when you're dealing with someone like Harden, so you got Grimes and Harden, and Hart can kind of flip flop between those guys. I think that's a pretty decent matchup. I mean, the Sixers clearly come in maybe with a little more talent, but the Knicks can beat those guys. Like I think that if they get to that 6th spot, the Knicks have a real shot to win a first round series. And again, that's not something I thought I would have said even a month ago or even maybe 3 weeks ago. But the way they're playing right now, that's how confident I'm feeling.
Plus, you factor in the Knicks would be completely playing with house money against a series against the Sixers. Heaven forbid the Knicks ever win one of those first 2 games in Philly. The pressure gets ratcheted up incredibly high on the Sixers. How does Harden respond? It's wild going into a series. The Knicks would actually, in my opinion, have the advantage at point guard. The matchup between Harden and Brunson just shows how well he's played the season. And I've never been a big Harden guy, especially in a big spot. And we've talked about the Philly before. I am not a Philly guy. I'm not a Philly fan. I'm not high on Harden. I'm not high at Rivers in a big spot. The thing that kind of pushes it over the edge for me is Embiid, because he's capable of averaging. He can average 40 points a night on 60% shooting over a 6-game series. Maxi's a stud coming off the bench. He'll probably be in the starting lineup by that stage of the game.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see how they handle it. But Anthony Melton is a great defender, but Brunson's ate in his lunch the last 2 times they've met.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Obviously, a lot to look forward to, but the reality is these are not crazy conversations to have. And I would have thought it would have been crazy if you told me 2 months ago, 3 months ago, that we'd be having these conversations and not sounding foolish.
Yeah, I think the one thing about Philly that makes me feel good about the Knicks in the matchup with them is I think the Knicks have shown they have their most problem with teams that have an athletic profile that is so much more superior to them. Philly is a extremely slow team. They're starting, guys that are in their upper 30s. A guy like PJ Tucker, James Harden, not going to beat you with athleticism. Embiid's a huge guy and a great athlete at the center position. But outside of him, they're not a team that's going to run away from you. They're not a team that's Tobias Harris, good player, but not an athlete. Like the Knicks athletically match up extremely well with them. At that point, it'd be the determinant of, all right, who plays well over 7 games. And I'm not sure if nobody will play as good as Embiid over 7 games, but could the Knicks as a team play better than the Sixers? Coach better than the Sixers for 7 games?
It's possible.
I think that is not impossible. It is definitely not impossible.